What do you say?
I'm sorry, we just kind of broke even this year. So,
Well, no, if you broke even, you're all right, because everyone else is down a little bit.
yeah.
Down this year.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
You're about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, our guest is Tom Saunders. He's an independent writer and researcher who has been working on anthropogenic climate change and fracking issues. Those issues are very closely aligned, and we'll try to separate them and bring them together if we can during the broadcast. He started by asking why people that lived near fracking operations were getting sick with the same medical problems as Agent Orange. Remember, Agent Orange was used extensively during our invasion. They weren't at war with us. We invaded them in Vietnam. The short answer is both sets of victims are being contaminated with the same type of environmental toxins. Tom, welcome to our program.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Well, Tom, we have two issues here. We have the fracking issue, which is closely aligned and probably inextricably intertwined with the climate change issue. How do you want to approach us? Do you want to take the fracking issue first, or you want to talk about climate change first, or I'll leave it up to you. Why don't you take it away?
I think they're both pretty much, as you said, intertwined. See, man-made climate change is about more than just greenhouse gases and global warming.
I agree.
You see, we have our environment, we have a microenvironment, which is like our genetic makeup, our biological processes, and a macro environment, which is more prone to categorizing your greenhouse gases and the global warming effect. I have a bad problem trying to separate the two. The other writers like Dar Jamal and Gloria Atwood and others, they do separate them. But I think it's a mistake, because the same problems are coming from the same sources.
I see. Well, for example, the other day on, I don't recall where I heard this, whether or not it was on the internet or whatever, but there was a scientist who was talking about greenhouse gases, and he said the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted by the Earth naturally is in the, I forgot how many, like 30,000 gigatons or something like that a year or
yeah,
day. I forgot the number, but that's immaterial. And they said the amount of greenhouse gases emitted as a result of human activity is an infinitesimal part of that. It is almost immeasurable. And when you consider that if a volcano, for example, erupts, there is enough greenhouse gases emanating from that explosion that it would constitute decades of human activity. And so by we know that human activity contributes to greenhouse gases, but its effect is not as great as some of the political leaning people, who want to use this as a political hot dog type thing, would lead you to believe. I mean, it's there. We should be mindful. We all should be kind to the planet, whomever we are. And then, of course, what the government does is they talk about greenhouse gases and how bad I am because I am, I drive a car, but they don't talk about the military operations and how much greenhouse gases are a result of all the trucks, the airplanes, the ships, and whatever that our armed forces unnecessarily consume. During all the fuel that's consumed during these operations. So it's so convoluted. It's to me, it's a political issue. Foremost, beyond a geographical issue, a climate issue.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised you didn't talk about cycles. The cycle argument, because there's constant warming and cooling. And by the way, a volcanic eruption has a tendency to cool things down rather than heat them up.
That's correct.
Although it does,
yeah, right.
it does emit quite a few gases. You see, what happens is we have a troposphere, which is the space between the stratosphere and the surface of the Earth. And that's where our gases are trapped. And the more greenhouse gases we produce, whether it's man-made or natural, what happens is it acts like an insulating blanket. And the thicker your gases are, why the thicker the blanket, the hotter it's going to get. And there's very little question in anybody else's mind that what we're looking at is man-made. A man-made problem, man-made heating. I mean, all the methane that's being produced from fracking worldwide, it wasn't there before. That's all man-made. And the fact that these fracking operations produce EDCs, which is endocrine disruption chemicals, that's worldwide, and that's incredibly dangerous to man. And those chemicals were not there until man put them there. Until man started fracking, we didn't have that. So definitely we have man-made climate change. We have disruption. But we also have disruption in the microenvironment where, we have different diseases and things that are related to climate change going on. I forget who wrote the article I'm thinking of. They projected a lot of different biological diseases, normal biological diseases, a lot of things like malaria and all those related mosquito diseases. They're all going to probably progress as time goes on. You understand that natural climate change disruptions are on a 50-year timeline. What we do now doesn't really take full effect until 50 years from now. And that makes it tough. That makes it really tough to get people to try to understand that, all this methane we've let in the air, it's not going to take full effect until 50 years. Now, 100 years from now, I can't even imagine what it might be like, because we're going to hit tipping points where no matter what we do, man's not going to be able to fix it. Right now, they say, as far as some aspects of climate change disruption goes, we can fix a few things. They're talking about being able to take carbon dioxide out of the air, but the problem is carbon dioxide is just not the most dangerous gas. Methane is.
I say, how much of the methane that's being emitted is being emitted as a result of fracking and other manufacturing processes?
Very hard to estimate. I've read a few studies, but the problem is there's nothing, at least nationwide, that's going on. They figure Some of the studies say that about 7% of the methane that escapes goes into the atmosphere from a given fracking operation. That's either a drilling well or a disposal well. I can think of the word disposal. So, like, let me read you this about Oklahoma because it's interesting. Now, Oklahoma has 69,899 square miles with a population of 3,900,000. We got 40,000 extraction wells and 3,200 disposal wells. Now, the approximation for this model as far as how much fracking compound goes in one well is 60,000 pounds per well. So we take an average of 5 million gallons of water and we mix it with the fracking compounds, and that's what goes into the earth. We got 2.4 billion pounds of fracking compound for all the wells that we have, the 40,000 wells, and that's 216 billion gallons of water at 5 million per well. Now, studies by Dr. Susan Nagel of the University of Missouri confirm that EDC, endocrine disruption chemicals contamination, can occur up to 10 miles from a fracking site. The 43,200 wells with a 10-mile contamination zone per well produces 432,000 square miles of contaminated area.
Jeez. Wow. Well, if fracking is causing that much damage, not only to people, but to the environment and the geography of where they're drilling, because it's not a pretty site to start off with, why does this persist? Why hasn't this been rolled back or deemed to be an illegal drilling activity, if in fact it's causing all these problems and it's so dangerous? And we're talking about where is the EPA, for example, where the EPA, God forbid I do something and have a spray can. The EPA is at my front desk, or front door. You have a spray can that's illegal. Here they have these large fracking operations emitting all of this methane, which is apparently dangerous to the atmosphere. Where's the EPA on this?
Well, I don't think the EPA has any say over it. I mean, there was the Halliburton loophole, which let the fracking industry just ignore the Safe Water Act, the Clean Air Act. They don't have any real regulation on them. The only place that fracking's been stopped is New York, which is ironic because the Attorney General of New York has started an investigation on Exxon. But then they found out that almost every energy company that does fracking has also tried to suppress any real information.
Well, so why would Halliburton or any other company be given a free pass on something that's so dangerous to the atmosphere? I mean, the EPA forces companies to do some of the most ridiculous things to prevent even ounces of contaminants leaking, which have an effect on no one, but yet we're talking about megatons of methane, and yet they get a pass. I don't understand that.
Just the way it was set up with Dick Cheney during the Bush administration. Things have stayed that way since. And honestly, it takes sometimes quite a few years for symptoms to show up.
Yeah. Now, fracking activity has been reduced substantially because of the price of oil. And
right.
How much fracking activity has the fracking activity declined as a result of the depressed price of a barrel of oil?
Haven't really run across those statistics.
Okay.
I'd like to know myself. I try to keep up. I work every day a few hours in the morning to review articles and search and investigate. And so far, I haven't gotten too many good statistics at all. I didn't have anything like the information I have now until late into 2014 rather.
All right. Now, are there any organizations or activist groups that are working to prevent fracking in the future, that it may have an influence on Congress where, hopefully in the next 50 years something will get done, to reverse this? And even if they did, and the price of oil starts going up, would the lack of fracking place us in an uncompetitive situation as we were before fracking?
It might. However, Dr. Susan Nagel has estimated just in the EU alone, it's going to be billions of dollars in healthcare costs. I mean, Agent Orange victims didn't know until 1980 that they were contaminated, and it's the same with all EDCs. They don't act like other poisons. There's a couple of odd things about EDCs. They will kill a certain amount of people right away, but the greatest number can wait 10, 20 years before they ever get a symptom.
I see.
The people that are responsible for this mass poisoning will likely just live out their lives and be dead by the time that we see where it becomes obvious. You know anything about Mekong syndrome?
Never heard of it.
Mekong syndrome is what's happened to all the people along the Mekong Delta that have been poisoned by Agent Orange since the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War and since then, people are still getting poisoned by the amount of Agent Orange that we dropped then. But what happens is these contaminated people will have children, and they will be deformed or they will have some sort of birth defect. And if they have children, the amount of damage that's done to the genetics compounds, they're going to have even worse defects. Two-headed children, people born without limbs. It's bad. Let me read this real quick. EDCs are known to cause breast and prostate cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, thyroid diseases, diabetes. They're a direct cause of chromosomal damage, infertility, asthma, obesity, strokes, heart disease, chloracne, peripheral neuropathy, autoimmune disease, Alzheimer's, autism, Parkinson's diseases. The teratogenic effects, which that means that just what I said, if I'm contaminated by Agent Orange, I'm a teratogenic. If I were to try to have children, they would probably be deformed, and if they had children, it would go on, it would be worse, and that's what teratogenic means. But they include the missing organs, missing bones, extra limbs, enlarged hearts, various forms of mental retardation, and there's less commonly known maladies from EDCs. But that's just a laundry list of the medical problems that people could have that get critically contaminated.
Yeah. Now, does fracking apply only to oil, or does it apply to gas as well, natural gas as well?
Either one.
Do they use fracking for natural gas as well?
Well, mostly natural gas. They use it for oil now too.
Okay, I see. I thought it was mostly oil with only. I guess I had it reverse. I thought the fracking was to release the oil, the heavy oil, from the bedrock so that it could float back up to the surface. But it's also
the process will work for either gas or oil.
Okay, and it's used for both, right? Now,
right, but mostly for gas.
All right. Is it used for any other type of drilling other than oil and gas?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
That doesn't mean there's not one. It just means that I don't know of any.
You know, what I guess what confounds me is that we hear, at least weekly, about secondhand smoke, how dangerous it is. There's all sorts of lobbying groups trying to reduce the average person's exposure to secondhand smoke. Of course, you can't smoke in any public area or a government building or whatever. And yet we have this fracking industry, which just on the surface, and I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination, I can't even spell fracking, but I mean, even taking that alone, and very little, if anything, is being done. It's just so incongruous. Either you're going to, be the safeguard for the people when large corporations come in and do something illegally, or you're not. But they seem to cherry pick what they want to work on.
Oh yeah.
And so what organizations are trying to get this so that it's all cohesive? Not that I want government regulation on anything, but I mean, if you're going to have it, you might as well be consistent. Are there any organizations that are fighting for this?
Sure. There's the Frack Dallas or Frack America, Greenpeace, probably the Sierra Club, although I'm not very familiar with what they're doing. But yeah, you can look up any number of smaller organizations. There's always somebody trying to start, one cause or another.
Right. Now, how many years or decades has there been a movement to limit or not only reduce but eliminate fracking altogether?
Well, fracking has been going on for 50 to 70 years, but not much of it. Most of the large disseminated operations only came about since 2000 or so. As a matter of fact, if we're on a 50-year timeline as far as ACD disruptions, so 2000's a very good year to start out. According to Gasland 2, fracking went global in 06. So still, the year 2000 is really a good year to view your 50-year timeline. So you can go to 2050, and we're 16 years into the first cycle, and we can already see the man-made changes in as far as EDC exposure and some of the other types of disruptions going on.
What happens on or about 2050? What happens then?
Well, of course, it's always speculative to do prophecy.
Right, I understand that. Yeah. But if someone says, hey, we have a 50-year cycle, if we continue fracking, it takes 50 years, and after 50 years, finish the sentence.
My guess is that we're going to see the effects of the teratogenic poisoning to the point where almost nobody's going to be able to have a normal kid. It's just not going to happen. There's too many critically contaminated people right now, and that's the teratogenic contamination comes from both radioactive and EDCs, radioactive exposure and endocrine disruption chemicals. There's the two bad ones, of course, are radioactive or contamination, but critical contamination is when you have a situation where you've been exposed and you get any kind of a medical condition. That's called critical contamination, and that's almost 99% assured, according to one organization. Let's see. I wanted to quickly look up a study I have marked here somewhere. Yeah, here it is. the Journal of Endocrinology and Metabolism, they've published a report, and they have a number of leading experts who say if you're exposed, there's a 99% possibility that you're going to show critical contamination. You're going to have some sort of medical effect, and it will be one of those that I read to you previously. All those assortments of diseases. And I might mention that when I first started examination into EDCs, what I found was most family doctors don't even know what they are. I go to the Veterans Administration hospitals a lot because I have a serious heart condition. And every time I meet a new doctor, it's always a classic question to them: do you know what EDCs are? And most of them will say no. So this is going to be a growing, horrible problem by 2050. We're going to see that. We're going to see the same kinds of results we saw after Vietnam veterans learned that they were exposed and what that entailed.
Now, is fracking a major factor in climate change, or is it a minor factor?
Oh no, it's a biggie.
All right, is that the number one? Is that public enemy number one for climate change? Is the methane?
Okay, that's kind of up for grabs because there's a lawsuit against Monsanto right now, which speculates that they're spraying of endocrine disruptors and other types of poison like glyphosate has done as much damage to the ability to scrub clean carbon deposits. I mean, the pollution is killing the land as far as being able to do carbon sink cleansing.
In what countries is fracking utilized, and who's the?
It's wide. It's worldwide.
Worldwide. Are we the number one frackers, or are there people who are fracking? Like, for example, China. Are they fracking more than we are?
That would be hard to estimate because nobody in the United States is much willing to, tell you how many wells there are. We know how many wells there are in places like Denton, Texas. But if you go over to Russia someplace, you'd probably have to count them yourself.
Okay, but fracking is utilized, that process is utilized in Russia. And what about the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia?
It's everywhere.
Okay.
It's everywhere. Anywhere that they're going to drill for oil or gas, that's pretty much the technique they're using now.
All right. So what is it's utilized everywhere. It is one of the major causes of the greenhouse gas effect or climate change.
Right.
There's really no strict government regulation limiting it. It seems like we are on a crash collision course, and no one's taking hold of the steering wheel and turning it at all. Or am I missing something?
That's what the Pope means by we're committing suicide. Yes.
Yeah. We seem to be committing suicide now. There's no question that there's enough corruption in government, to start a new universe. But I guess, do we have anyone in Congress, anyone who's running for office, who's addressing this issue at all?
No Republicans.
No Republicans, and why is that?
I would speculate that most of them are concerned with being reelected, getting the money to get reelected. It's mostly coming from the same sources that are doing the pollution, the big corporations, the plutocracy.
Okay. So we have a closed loop system where whatever is in, whatever is out, and nothing gets permeated at all, regardless of the regulations or legislation.
Yeah. Well, I'm 67. I don't know how old you are, but
you're a young 'un.
Oh, good.
You're a young punk compared to me. I tell you that. As I said in Harlem, you young punk. No, you're much younger than I am. Believe it or not. I know
Well,
I look so young, that's why all the young girls come after me, but that's another story. That's nothing to do with fracking,
you look pretty, I gotta admit, you look pretty good.
The check is in the mail.
But we're probably going to live the rest of our lives and notice very little compared to what they're going to notice in 2050 and from that point on. Because like I said, there's going to be a point when nobody's going to be able to have a normal child without some sort of DNA alterations.
Yeah, that's what my mother said 70 years ago, and that was before fracking, But, whenever you hear these people on television, these symposiums and whatever on climate change, you hear so much about carbon dioxide, the use of the automobile, coal-fired plants, gas-fired plants, or whatever. But after our break, I'd like to come back and say, well, why don't we hear about the fracking issue? It seems to be almost void unless I'm missing a good portion of it. Keep that, just the stew about that for a second. And Tom, could you stay with us while we just break for 1 minute for station identification and for our sponsors?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, folks. Don't go away. On the second half, we'd like you to call in 646-652-4620. That's 646-652-4620 with any of your questions or comments regarding fracking and climate change. And it's up to you, but please call. When you do call that number, press the 1 button. We have people on the line now, but if you don't press the 1 button, we will not know that you want to break in, okay? Hold on. We'll be right back in 1 minute. Don't go away. Thank you.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Branch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more.
Steve Harden of the Harden Insurance Agency has over 30 years of experience designing family insurance protection, including retirement planning. Call 918-488-0024 or go to hardenagency.com and request a free in-depth estate and retirement evaluation. We look forward to earning your trust and helping you meet your life goals.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
Well, we're back, folks. This is Joe Cristiano, your host for Liberty Talk Radio. With us, we have Tom Saunders, and our conversation has to do with fracking, the effect on the environment, the effect on people, and climate change, obviously. And the question that I asked before the break is that, we hear a lot about carbon dioxide and monoxide, for results of engines and cars running and whatever. I guess exhaust emissions is a word for it, and that seems to take center stage. And yet you hear very little, if any time, even as in symposiums, about fracking. And why is that the case? And is one not as bad as the other, or what?
Oh, definitely, fracking's we got to worry about it.
It's worse than automotive emissions.
I'd have to see a study, but I would assume, yeah. The reason carbon dioxide is kind of in the forefront is because there was the first Exxon studies back in the 70s and 80s where they could measure the carbon dioxide levels and the use of fossil fuels. They put that together.
But excuse me, Tom, don't cars emit carbon monoxide?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's is carbon monoxide as harmful to the environment as carbon dioxide? Because carbon dioxide is a natural gas. It's there all the time.
Right. I hesitate to answer because I don't know for sure.
Okay.
But it's a darn good question, and it will be one that I find out.
Okay. All right. So why don't we hear more in these symposiums on climate change? Why don't we hear more about fracking and the effects of fracking when we hear so much about automotive emissions and emissions from gas plants and coal-fired plants and whatever? But you don't hear much about. It seems you don't. I'm not at those symposiums. They may be talking about them, but when it comes to press time, you don't hear much about fracking or anything about fracking.
Right. Well, I think we're going to. One of the problems is most of the authors that have written about man-made climate change have never addressed the microenvironment about what's happening with the other poisons that are coming out of there besides methane. And these two belong together. There's no doubt in my mind because they're all part of the environment. They're all part of the environmental science and the biosphere. I think the ACD science has been so deterred, so fracked by fracking.
Okay, it's a good term. Yeah.
They just have a tendency to confuse people, and people aren't looking at ACDs holistically yet. That's part of my spiel. I want to be effective in getting Greenpeace and these other organizations to recognize the fact that these biological and genetic disruptions are just as important and just as related to the same sources as what's happening with the weather and those sort of climate change disruptions.
Right. Now, the fracking itself has other side effects. One would be earthquakes. My son lives in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and he says he feels quakes all the time. I mean, it's consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not high level. They're 3.2s and 3.4s.
Right.
But we just had one. I think was it this morning, Preston? Yeah, we had one this morning. How much was that? How big was that? 3.8. Now that's once you get to the 4.0 point on, you really feel that. I mean, that's quite a disruption. And what people don't realize is that every every tenth of a point that it's up, it's 10 times stronger or something like that. It's geometrically it increases in intensity geometrically, not arithmetically. Now there have been many questions here in Oklahoma whether or not fracking is in fact the cause. And of course, you'll find the oil industry saying, no, they have nothing to do with it whatsoever.
Actually, they're not saying that anymore.
Well, they don't,
there's been too many studies. And what causes the earthquakes as far as fracking goes is they dump the fracking waste into disposal wells.
Right.
Now that's what's causing the earthquakes.
Why does it cause an earthquake?
I think it's affecting the tectonic plates.
Is it sort of like a lubricant that allows it to move?
Right. I would be more inclined to refer that to a better informed expert. But generally, what's happening is those fracking wastes get dumped into holes, and then more waste and more waste and more waste and more waste. And I believe it's created enough pressure to affect the tectonic plates, below the Earth's surface. And that's another good question that I'm certainly going to look into.
Well, it seems that we have not been experiencing the number of earthquakes years ago that we are today, and the only variable is fracking, and yet there are so many people who are still, I mean, notable people in, of course, in office, who will deny that, and obviously they're denying it most likely because they are being funded by mega oil and all these other,
influenced by people like Alec.
Yeah, right.
Legislative Exchange Council. Yeah, you realize that Oklahoma now has more earthquakes than California.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. I wish I had some of those studies handy. I've got them buried in my research. I don't want to sit here and be looking through a bunch of papers and get lost and lose your time there. But yes, the amount of earthquakes is becoming very obvious. Nobody's denying that the cause of them are from fracking waste, and as you say, they're going to escalate. They're going to get worse, and one of them could set off the big danger along the Mississippi River. They've been waiting for a big earthquake down
from Missouri down, right? Yeah, the one that occurred in 1800 and something, and right, and apparently that was one of the largest earthquakes recorded in the United States. And they said, should that reoccur, we would have millions upon millions of lives lost. But it was all farmland at the time, and they were just a few farmhouses, and so very, very few people were directly affected. I mean, they were affected by it, but very few lives were lost because of that. They said today it would go right through the heart of Memphis, Tennessee, I believe. Not Memphis. Was it St. Louis?
Well, in St. Louis, Missouri, but it also
would go through Memphis as well. Okay, I'm being correct. Yeah, Memphis. And they said millions of lives would be lost. There's nothing that they can do about it. And yet, do you know if anything's being done about? I mean, is anyone discussing fracking and the increase in earthquake activity and how it can precipitate a megaquake, whereby it can really literally divide the United States into two continents almost? That's how big it can be.
Can be huge, and it can be extremely destructive. And to answer, I don't see much being done at all. Yeah. Fracking, as far as I can see, is only slowed down because of the economy.
Right.
The economy goes back up, so will the fracking. Nobody's doing anything in Congress or with any of the governmental agencies to stop it or slow it down. Like I said, New York's the only place that won't allow it, and I praise those people.
Well, how did New York? New York is typically not in the forefront of anything. I know I'm from New York. They're laggers. They're not leaders. And how do they become leaders in the anti-fracking arena when other states are nowhere near that?
They just did. They figured it out. They read the right thing at the right time, and the right people said, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to contaminate the finest water supply in the nation.
Yeah.
I mean, they did it to protect their water supply, and that's praise those people. When they first announced that they were going to take on Exxon, I contacted the Attorney General of New York, and I got in touch with one of their people named Peter Washburn, who's handling the case. Now, I sent him some of my stuff. The reason being is the science of ACDs is so completely fracked.
Okay.
They'll never figure it out, They'll never figure it out. I try to get people to look at what's happening in the microenvironment as well as the macro environment, and those two in turn affect what happens in our social environment.
Right.
And right now, as far as stopping fracking or even turning down the amount of greenhouse gases is just being ignored. They're just ignoring it.
Well, are you part of a movement or starting a movement or supporting any other movements to eliminate fracking?
Well, I try to write, and I contact as many of these organizations as I can. I call people. I've talked to the CDC. I've talked to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard did a civilian poll where they wanted people to comment on being able to transport barges full of fracking waste. Much of it is radioactive. And this was really before I got a hold of my best statistics and my best information about ECDs. But at the time, I wrote them and I warned them, and I'm on record as saying, hey, these barges could be real dangerous. And in some cases, when you've got a high degree of unacceptable radiation, you're talking about a floating smart bomb, and it could be blown up.
Right. Well, what do they do with this waste? Where does it go?
That's another good question. Nobody for sure knows. They could be going. It could be going into disposal wells. Could be being dumped in the ocean for all I know. For all anybody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody's really looking at it. There's no government regulation where they have to make themselves accountable. And that's why we don't know how many fracking wells there really are. We don't have good stats on that. We just don't.
Right. Where do you see climate change going?
In our lifetime, I don't think it'll happen. I think you and I will just go on and live the rest of our lives, and then we're probably going to be looking up or down after our demise and be able to see what's happening on the earth, and it's not going to be pretty.
Okay, so you'll be looking from up above, looking down at the earth, and I'll be looking from the flames of hell, looking up to see what happens. Is that what you're saying?
I think it depends upon who you talk to about that.
Okay. All right, hold on one second. We have a call on line one. Line one, caller, you're on the air. Your first name, please. Thank you for calling.
Gary.
Gary, yes, Gary.
Gary.
Gary, thank you for calling Liberty Talk Radio.
It's good to get in on this call. The fracking situation. Where is the money? Where have you followed the money? I mean, that seems to me to be the best place to start to see who's getting paid off and why the environmental protection agencies and these big organizations we fund with billions of dollars are supposed to be looking out after the environment and all this. Where are these folks?
Suppressed. They're being suppressed. The EPA doesn't have any money to do anything. I'm
sure they got a big budget.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't.
I mean, why can't they do anything? I mean, it seems to me that
all right,
that's their job.
It's supposed to be, isn't it? I've never been as disappointed in an organization like that than I am the EPA. They're not really doing their job. They can't do their job, and one of the reasons they can't do their job is we have Republican congressmen that are doing everything in their power to get rid of the EPA. They deter their funding. I get blibs from my congressman every week, and every week he's done something in regard to opposition for the EPA and any other.
Are they getting paid? I mean, if they're getting paid off, and these guys are getting paid off, isn't there somebody who is a journalist or an attorney or somebody that's got some gonads out there that'll go after these guys that are actually padding the system to their best advantage. There's got to be. I mean, crap! They found they got tapes on the people with the that were selling body parts for Planned Parenthood. I mean, you think they couldn't find a guy in a cigar that owns an oil company that they didn't, in bed with the prostitute that the Environmental Protection Agency and whoever set him up with. I mean, come on. This is crazy. We argue about this, and I don't want to wait till I'm dead to see something done about it.
Afraid you might have to.
Well, no,
yeah, it's pretty sad.
See, Gary,
we don't have anybody with any balls in this country anymore.
Yeah, Gary, your point is my point. Where is it? Wouldn't we be better off? And Gary, stay on the line for a second, please. Wouldn't it be better if we didn't have an EPA at all? And then if someone was drilling on your land and something like this occurred where there was, if the test was done and some methane and whatever was being emitted, that the drilling would just be stopped, period. Or they would get sued to a point where they would stay out of business.
The community would rise up and tar and feather the guy.
Right, but right now, if the community uprises, the government says tough luck. But the thing is that the communities are uprising, but they have no say. That's my problem.
Well, you've got a bunch of people that are. Here's the other thing. I think the left and right are fighting all the time over this crap when they ought to get together, because the way left and the way right, in my opinion, are on the same team.
Right, I agree.
You take, for example, the NRA and all their hunters and all that kind of stuff. These people want the environment to be good. They really do. You talk to them, they love the environment. They like to go out and have plenty of animals to shoot.
Right.
Okay? Well, that might not be the guy on the other side of the fence who's a tree hugger, as they call him. But, nonetheless, he wants his trees to grow and have beautiful, animals out there. But you know what? They both want the animals to thrive and survive.
That's
and
correct.
We're screwing them all over with the fracking and the pollution and all that stuff. And why can't somebody get together and maybe start talking to the other side and finding our points of commonality and going after these jerks?
Gary, run for president. I'll vote for you.
Yeah,
okay.
Me too.
Well, we have our board operator wants to interject something. This is a treat for all of us.
It's
a treat, a real treat.
I feel I hate to say this, guys, but after listening, I just feel so at loss about why in the world don't we have people in our leadership across our communities that have balls big enough to stand up to a bunch of crooks. Because that's all they are, is crooks. They're paying off each other to ship poisons in the middle of the night across our cities and dumping stuff in rivers, and we put up with it.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be that way. There's all kind of cleaner alternatives, and they don't use them because they want a bigger bottom line. And yeah, you can understand you got to have a profit to run a business, but that doesn't mean to run a house it would be profitable to shoot your kids, but you don't do it.
Well, to throw in another monkey wrench in the gears is the ethanol program. Is another polluting program.
It's a dumb thing. It's a stupid thing.
And yet it's a government program. It's not private industry doing something where governments control. It is a government program, and a few people are making we talk about the 1%. The 1% are making a fortune at the expense of everyone, not only here in the United States, but also overseas. People who have usually purchased corn at a low price, they can't do that anymore because of all the fracking. But let me, our board operator, Preston, he wants to say a few words.
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, once again, isn't this just an example of big oil or big business? The lobbyists they've gotten away with everything for 100 years. I mean, big oil wins for some reason, and here we go. They're starting to frack a new thing, and somehow they're getting to do it, and it does cost. I mean, like I said, Gary brought it up earlier. I mean, it's just another example of big business winning out because of their lobbyist groups in Washington.
Well, I want to add something to that.
People are being
not
paid off, and that's crooked, and it's wrong, and there's laws against it, and why somebody doesn't go after, everybody has to, oh, no, we can't do that. They're a politician, and they're, oh, we don't want to cause any waves. I mean, come on.
Hey,
if people are crooks, they ought to go to jail.
I keep having heart attacks.
What was that again? Tom, say that again. Tom,
I said I go after them, except I keep having heart attacks.
Well, stop doing that. I command you to stop doing that. Heal, But the problem is not big industry, because that's what the leftists do. They say, look, it's big industry is bad. It's not big industry. It's when the government is involved with big industry, then you have a problem, right? Because if you have big industry and they were polluting the environment, and someone went out there and said, "Hey, you can't do that," we're going to blow your location up, if you do that one more time. I mean, they would stop it. But it's because big industry is in bed with government, which is a oligarchy or fascist form of government. That's what we have today. We have an oligarchy.
It's
fascism, right?
To be involved with industry.
Yeah, I know. My father fled Italy during a fascist regime, and my grandfather was killed by the fascist regime, committed suicide, in fact, because of that. But it's not industry. It's the industry in bed with government. That's the problem. Get rid of government, and you don't have that problem. So we shouldn't blame industry. Industry is doing what they do best, making profits. Government's supposed to be protecting us. They're not doing their job. So I blame the government first.
Well,
then
I
industry.
think you guys are doing your job, and that is you're the guys out on the rooftop hollering and screaming. I want you to just keep it up, because without people like you guys talking about it and getting this out in the forefront, nobody will ever get the balls to go and put these people in jail. That's what we need. We need more of a conversation out in the open, and quit protecting the crooks and get the real truth out. And I appreciate what you're doing, Joe, at Liberty Talk Radio. I listen to you all the time.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Just do me a favor, just keep those checks coming in, okay? Okay. All right, thank you very much. All right, Tom, all right, now, what do we do? We have about 4 minutes. What do we do now? I mean, what are you doing? Come on, I'm lazy. I'm old. I can't do anything anymore,
Okay.
You have to keep on having in between heart attacks. What do you do?
Let me read this to you.
Okay.
I want to read what I've written here about the future of ACDs, anthropogenic climate disruptions. The future of ADCs are ever-increasing number of severe inland floods, rising oceans, droughts, superstorms, ocean lake acidification, earthquakes, toxic biological, chemical, and radioactive contaminations, growing global greenhouse gas effects, huge property damage, social instability, famine, community displacement, critical shortage of essential goods and essential life services. We'll also start seeing probably in 2050 a lot more of species extinction, and that's an indicator. There's a couple of scientific points that are like warning signs, and it has to do with the science of loopholes and feedback loops, rather, and tipping points. Tipping points are when we can't do anything more than there's just nothing we can do after the tipping points. And as far as some of the types of disruptions that we have in climate change, we may already be past tipping points. I think we're past tipping points as far as critical contamination from EDCs. There's just too many people that could be critically contaminated right now and just don't know it, and they're not going to know for another 10 years, 20 years. And it keeps, the politicians know this, the corporations know this. They know people in our lifetime are not, probably not going to start the revolution it's going to take to change all this. But it's coming. It's coming.
Okay, Tom. Tom, one item, and we're running out of time, and I wanted to bring this up before, and I forgot, and that is when I was listening to this scientist on climate change, he said a major contributor to climate change is actually sunspot activity, and that trumps everything that man is doing on Earth. Just a quick comment from you on that.
Sure. I think that's bullshit.
Okay.
Plain and simple.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in reading. I'd like to order his book to see what his take is on it, because I had heard that before, but I had not heard that from a prominent scientist before. So I'm just curious. I mean, I have no way of evaluating that at all, but I did want your opinion. But we're about out of time, Tom. Let me give you the next 30 seconds to tell everyone if they want to reach you or write to you or become active. Active in promoting what you're doing. I'll give you the next 30 seconds for that.
Sure. What you can do is get in touch with your politicians. In Oklahoma, we have 2 U.S. senators. One of them is Inhofe, and he's famous for being a climate denial person. The other one's Langford, and he's part of the Christian nationalist movement, and they're just hand in hand. They're hand in hand with the plutonomy as far as where the money's going, and they're against the EPA. They're against any kind of regulation that would slow up the profits for the oil and fossil fuel industry. Like I said, in 2050, I'd like to be able to have this conversation and see what's happening then.
Yes, that would be interesting, right?
Because by then, the feedback loops will have progressed the damage to the point where it's not going to be deniable anymore. We're going to see real warming like we've had this year, and that's everywhere. The whole world's been warmer, and of course it'll go the other way. Now we'll have cooling extremes, but that's what happens in the climate disruption science. We have the tipping points, and past the tipping points we have critical slowing in regard to how some things happen, like before there's a turnover in the biosphere, there's usually a point where it takes longer to recover from even small disturbances.
Right.
And
okay,
so
Tom, we're about out of time. I'm awfully sorry for interrupting you, but my wife wants to move to a warmer climate. I say don't have to do that. Just wait around a few years, and it'll be warmer right here. Okay. I want to thank you very much for being on our program, and I hope you will accept our invitation to return a later date and give us an update of what's going on.
I certainly will. And It's good to see you again, Joe.
Same here, Tom. Thank you so much. All right, folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.